Welcome back to the Explainer, everyone. Okay, today we are tackling one of the most frustrating and honestly most expensive traps in software development. We're pulling directly from Ashganda's product strategy insights and operational protocols to show you how a single, simple, pre-built script can literally save you months of engineering time. We're talking about retiring massive product risks before you even write a single line of code. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We're going to hit the content bankruptcy trap, the content density gate, setting unbiased thresholds, the 18 kilobyte real slice, validating real coverage, and finally, pipelining the content. It's going to be a total masterclass in avoiding wasted development time. First step, Section 1, the content bankruptcy trap, building the engine for an empty shell. So imagine this. You've got this killer idea for a content-driven app, right? Think a daily puzzle, a quiz, something like that. Your dev team grinds for months building out the engine. The user interface is absolutely gorgeous. You push it to the App Store, and then the ultimate developer nightmare hits. You realize your core data source only has enough juice to keep the app running for maybe 6 weeks before everything just starts repeating. So I pose this question to you. What is the absolute most expensive way to discover your app has no content? You finish building it first. Yeah, it's devastating. You've literally burned through all your capital, your time, your emotional energy, just building a beautiful delivery mechanism that has absolutely nothing left to deliver. This is the exact trap that the team behind Cineladder, which is this really cool daily Indian cinema quiz, this is what they desperately wanted to avoid. They knew that running on a hunch about content was basically a recipe for disaster. Which brings us to Section 2, the content density gate. Testing the data first. So instead of guessing, Ashganda's team used what's called a content density gate. It's a pre-built check that measures whether your data source can actually sustain your product's content demands against preset thresholds. This is a massive game changer. It takes that fuzzy, I think there's probably enough content out there feeling and converts it into a hard, actionable number. You make the data prove itself first. Section 3, setting unbiased data thresholds. Deciding before you look. Now, what's really interesting about this is how disciplined you have to be. For Cineladder, they knew they needed 3 core ingredients: films, actors, and the connections between them. And they set hard minimums per language track before they even touched a database. They needed at least 200 films to avoid weekly repetition, 500 actors because that's where the puzzle variety comes from, and 2,000 edges, or links between the films and people, because those connections actually are the puzzle. Doing this before writing any queries is absolutely crucial. Because listen to this quote from the sources. If you run the query and then decide what counts as enough, you will find a way to be satisfied by whatever you got. That is not a gate, it is a rationalization. This is such a dangerous trap for product managers. If you peek at the numbers first, human nature will totally convince you that whatever you found is fine. You're basically grading your own homework, and that leads right back to content bankruptcy. But when the team actually ran their pre-built script against Wikidata for the Tamil, Hindi, and Telugu tracks, the results were incredible. All 3 cleared the thresholds massively. We're talking anywhere from 6 to 30 times over the bar. Hindi only needed 2,000 edges, and they found over 21,000. Boom. The biggest risk of the whole project was retired instantly. They knew, for a fact, they had enough data to run these puzzles for decades. Moving to Section 4, the 18 kilobyte real slice, surfacing the hidden truths. Now, high-level aggregate numbers sound great, but they can hide totally unusable data, right? A film record with no cast attached is completely useless for a puzzle. So the team built one real end-to-end slice of data for Tamil cinema spanning the 1980s. And this brilliantly illustrates the power of testing early. 18 kilobytes. That was the zipped payload size for the entire decade of puzzle data. Measuring this tiny footprint literally dictated the app's entire architecture. It meant the data could just download on demand and work completely offline. If that payload had weighed 5 megabytes instead, they would have wasted weeks building a complicated streaming and caching system. Inside that tiny 18 kilobyte slice, they found a super rich dataset. 303 films, 166 actors, and 654 edges. But they didn't just trust the numbers. They actually spot-checked the data against names that a real fan would instantly recognize. We're talking absolute legends like Kamala Hassan, Rajinikanth, and Ilayaraja. They needed to know the resulting puzzle wouldn't just work technically, but that it would actually feel authentic and fair to a human player. Section 5. Validating real coverage. Making smart product cuts. Building out that real slice exposed a pretty harsh reality. Not every feature you dream up on a whiteboard actually survives contact with real-world data. When they looked at specific fields, director data was there 92% of the time. Music data, 94%, highly usable. But producer data, that plummeted to a really dismal 30% coverage on Wikidata. And this leads to what we call the human test. Because just having data availability doesn't mean it translates to a good question. Music had 94% coverage, right? But the formatting on Wikidata was all over the place, making it technically unusable, so they dropped it completely. Editor and writer data had decent coverage, but honestly, are those memorable to a casual player? Not really. So those were scrapped from the app logic to keep the game fair. So the crucial point is what they did with that producer data sitting at 30%. They didn't just throw it away, they demoted it. Producer data became a supporting detail in the puzzle, never the main answer. Think about it. A trivia question where the answer is literally missing 70% of the time isn't a hard question, it's just a broken app. Knowing that exact coverage number up front let them adapt the actual game logic smoothly before writing the code. All right, Section 6, Pipelining the Content, the Canonical Image Protocol. We're going to pivot just a little bit here because testing data density is only half the battle. The other part is managing the actual media assets. True omnichannel content syndication requires an automated Wave 1 distribution pipeline. Just like the density gate saves you from wasted coding, having strict operational standards for your visual assets saves you from hours of manual, mind-numbing work. You can't have your team manually resizing images for every single social platform. It just completely kills your momentum. So, the sources highlight this really slick protocol, the canonical image set. It's a strict requirement to export every master visual into exactly these 7 predefined files, using specific file name suffixes and aspect ratios. You've got your 16:9s for YouTube, your 9:16s for Reels and TikTok, right down to the 1:1 squares for Instagram. By setting these strict minimums up front, the files become completely auto-discoverable by the distribution pipelines. The system just handles the heavy lifting seamlessly. The method generalized. Apply this to your next app. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actionable 6-step checklist for your own projects. 1. Write your absolute minimum thresholds before you query anything. 2. Count the connections, not just the base records. 3. Build one real end-to-end slice to expose the truth early. 4. Measure that payload size to inform your architecture. 5. Check the specific per-field coverage. Don't just assume the data is whole. And 6. Always apply the human test. The return on investment for running this process is just wild. It costs a fraction of a day, it uses literally one script and a JSON file, but in exchange, it completely retires the single largest project risk you face and saves you weeks, maybe months of wasted engineering. It is an absolute no-brainer. So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought today. The old mantra of if you build it, they will come is honestly a dangerous fallacy, especially for content-heavy apps. Ask yourself, if you build the engine, will the content magically appear? Or should you test the data first? I think we both know the answer to that now. Thanks so much for exploring this framework with me today on The Explainer. Take these protocols, apply them to your pipelines, and stop guessing about your data. See you next time.